So we're coming out of the face-off weekend, which I did better than I thought I would during, and right into the 5th prompt for Amazing Readathon. And despite my TBR planning, this one did throw me through a loop. It's the first one, I think so far, where I haven't been in the mood to read the book I picked. For this leg, the prompt is to read a book with an isolated setting. Originally, I had picked Death on the Caldera for this one, and I did give it a good try. I've read a few chapters and it's just not working for me right now. The vibes are very YA, and while I enjoy that sometimes, I don't think it's what I'm in the mood for right now. The section I did read, I do think has potential, and this isn't a DNF forever, and I'm definitely not saying it's a bad book, but it's not what I'm looking for in this moment. So I'm gonna set it aside and pick something else. It just so happens that the easiest thing to do for this prompt was to pull one of the books I had planned for a later leg. So I'd been planning on reading Murder Takes the High Road by Lanyon for the building on the cover prompt. This is a murder mystery set on a road trip through the Scottish Highlands. I think it will be isolated both in the sense that the Highlands are fairly isolated, but also we're doing a very, very closed cast just of the people on this bus tour. So I think it should count, and it's one I've had on my TBR for absolutely ages. I keep either forgetting about it or pushing it back. And I think I said in my TBR video for the Amazing Readathon that one of the problems was that books set in Scotland, especially not written by Scottish or British writers, doubly especially, I hate to say, but written by American writers, tend to over magicify Scotland in a lot of ways that, as someone who lives here, just is irritating. It feels cliched, and it throws you out of every book. So I have hopes for this. I'm not going to say high, but I do tend to love Josh Lanyon's writing, so chances are good to fair, and I think I'm going to do better with this than I would with Death on the Caldera. It also helps that it's short, and I am now trying to catch up a bit of time that I not wasted, but I spent trialing that book. This is probably going to create problems further down the line, but I figure that a book with a building on the cover will be an easier prompt to fill later, and also I'll have a little bit of time to think about that. So we're gonna make the switch now and hope for the best. Murder Takes the High Road was an unexpected delight. Overall it probably came in about a 3. I enjoyed that there was a sort of double bluff mystery going on, but it's not going to be a favourite. Similarly, the romance is fine, but I've definitely seen Lanyon do better. So for those two fairly critical elements, we're coming in somewhere about a 3 or 3.5. But what I loved and was so impressed by was the way it tackled the setting, Scotland, this road trip. I think there was incredibly smart choices made throughout the book, both on the writing side of it and in the narration, which could have went horrifically wrong and didn't. So, I mean, incredible props there. We're following an American librarian, Carter, who has flown to Scotland to go on a road trip of literary highlights from his favourite author. It just so happens that his ex and his ex's new boyfriend are also going to be on this trip, because Carter had bought the trip for himself and his boyfriend before they broke up. So there's a little bit of tension right there at the start, but what Lanyon was smart to do in this is, right from the start, our protagonist is American, which means that any inconsistencies or inaccuracies in the author's way of presenting contemporary Scotland can be written off as something that comes from the protagonist, which I thought was clever. Similarly, we have an American narrator, so although there were 1 or 2 Scottish accents dotted throughout, it's a tour bus full of American tourists. There were very few Scottish characters. Their voices didn't pop up that often, and when they did, I didn't have any problem with them. Maybe if we had had a Scottish lead, or it had been one American dropped into a sea of Scottish voices. An American doing those accents might have bothered me, but I thought the narrator did a fantastic job. There were even a couple of points that I was so happy with. They start off in Glasgow before they go off to the Highlands, and one of the American tourists pronounces it the American way, where they say Glasgow, like glass, where we would say glass. Tiny linguistic difference, but like one of my pet peeves, and I think one of like the big bugbears, and Carter, internally, he's not a complete douchebag, but like internally he corrects it. It gave me confidence that Lanyon has actually listened to Scottish accents, especially Glaswegian accents, which is slightly different from what you tend to see on TV. In terms of the setting, I don't think I picked up on anything that struck me as massively out of place. There was one mention about how the bus is going to Stirling and Perth. They mentioned that as being the Highlands, whereas I would say that's very much still Central Belt. But it's, like I say, it's the kind of inconsistency that maybe it's an opinion thing. I mean, dividing lines, but also, if it's wrong, that's something that having it be an American protagonist means that if they got it wrong, they got it wrong. It doesn't feel like an inconsistency from the author. And with the rest of it being so smoothly done, I'm inclined to give the benefit of the doubt. That said, it is a short book and I wasn't massively sold by either the romance or the mystery, which in a romantic mystery is important. But overall, the setting and the way the setting was done definitely elevated the book as a whole for me. If this was my first Joss Lanyon book, I don't know that I would be particularly stoked to go on and maybe read more. It definitely felt like one of their more middling offerings in general, but in terms of Scottish settings, it's been a real high point. That aside, the next prompt has dropped, and thankfully it's not the building on the cover one, which I still need to find what I'm going to replace this with. But the next prompt is the 2 or more POVs. So I'm going to be picking up Paladin's Strength by T. Kingfisher, and that is going to double up with Faye's scored book club read. So for me, it's a reread, and I'll let you know how I got on with it. My reread of Paladin's Strength, one day I'll get them right, went really well. I have read the first 3 books in that Saints of Steel series. So Paladin's Grace, Strength, and Hope. And then I still have the last one to read. But when Faye announced that her Discord group were going to read them one a month, or one every other month, I decided to reread those first 3 and then read the 4th with the group. And I'm really glad I did. Paladin's Strength, I remember, of the 3 originally, being my least favourite. I wouldn't say that I disliked it, because I tend not to dislike T. Kingfisher, but it definitely underwhelmed me, and the reread totally changed that. In this, we are following Istvan and Clara. The series has different romantic leads for each of the books. Each couple gets their own story, and there is a kind of overarching plotline that is happening in the series. So after the events of the first book, where we were introduced to a kind of supernatural serial killer, Istvan has gone on the road to look for more information. Istvan is a member of the Saints of Steel. They're kind of religious knights, and their god died, which led to most of the paladins going mad, breaking with reality, berserker fits, homicide, badness. So our remaining paladins are much fewer in number and are all in their ways incredibly traumatized. While he's on the road, he bumps into Clara. Clara is a nun. Her and her sisters were kidnapped to be sold into a fighting pit. Clara got ill on the journey and was thrown out. Most of the story happens on the road, and Clara and Istvan have a really nice kind of bantery, will they won't they dynamic that is incredibly fueled by both their insecurities. Istvan has similar insecurities to Stephen in the first book, probably mostly because of the events that happened after their god died, but they all just feel like they're not quite complete people anymore. Clara is a bear shapeshifter, and so was given to the Sisters of Ursa as a child because they're the only people that know how to control, to contain the bear, which when she transforms can run riot. Clara then obviously has a lot of issues again with self-worth. What I love though is that both Clara and Istvan are big people. They're both very tall, they're both very broad, they're both very muscular, they're both always the biggest person in the room. And none of their self-worth issues were tied to that physical aspect. They don't tend to be because she is a woman in a bigger body. They tend to be because she's a bear. While I do like road trip stories, I tend not to like quest stories in fantasy, and those two things are incredibly similar sometimes, and I don't know exactly what the difference is, either technically or in my own head, but this and Sword Heart, which is in the same universe but is more of a standalone, both take our characters onto the road, but in a way that I really like. It doesn't feel like Lord of the Rings type quest fantasy, it feels more like a road trip, and I really enjoyed the different aspects that we got along the way. There are fighting pits that our characters have to liberate. There is the storyline to do with the serial killers, which dips its toe just a scooch into that kind of darker fantasy, which I think reminds you that Kingfisher also writes horror. Only a sliver of it, but there's moments where that kind of ugh is definitely there, more in idea than in gore. I also really like the bit where Clara and Istvan are kind of co-opted into being the display pieces for a travelling miracle elixir salesman. That had a lot of fun to it. Rereading definitely improved my opinion in the book. I don't know whether I would rate it higher than the first book now, but I'd say they're easily on par. I'm really looking forward to picking up the third book now because that was my favourite, and if I like that one even more, then we're rolling. So that one, I think, what are we in, June? I think we will be reading in August. I've actually managed to catch up a little bit time-wise. So for now, I'm gonna dip into some of my sightseeing books, see if there's anything short that I can squeeze in, or something maybe that I could start as an audiobook, because my next two books are, I think, both physical. I might want an audio just to see me through the next week or so. I'll let you know how I got on with those. It is very, very hot and sweaty today, so we are keeping this update as short as possible. The prompt for this leg is to read a book with a building on the cover, so obviously I had to find something new. I have been not quite reading slumpy for the past couple of days, but something approaching that, and I think it's just the heat that I've not really been in the mood to read. All I want to do is just kind of sit and stare into the middle distance. But I did find something that worked. I wanted something that was short-ish, something that was an easy, low brain intensity read, and it just so happened something that kind of fits the summery, hot vibes that are going on here right now. So I picked up Death on the Lanai by Rachel Epsom Courage. This is a book in her Golden Girls Cozy Mystery series, which is based on the characters from, and obviously heavily inspired by, the 80s TV series. Death on the Lanai is the second book in the series, and having read both now, the first being Murder by Cheesecake, I have to say that Courage really has these characters nailed, and the books do exactly what they say on the tin. These are, in my opinion, as someone who loves the Golden Girls TV show, they just nail perfectly the voices of each of the characters, the voices literally of the actresses. They are really well thought out in terms of the characterization. We do in part get the four girls falling into their kind of stereotypical roles, those really simplified cliches that they each break down into, but we also get a little bit more from each girl when we are in their POV. So we do get some of the depth that they develop as characters throughout the series and some of the insights that I'm sure the actresses wanted to put into them rather than just those 4 cardboard cutouts. I think it works really well. I think it works perfectly. This one in particular was a bold choice. The concept is that a mysterious invitation arrives at the villa and the girls aren't sure which one it's addressed to, but it also comes with a really fancy brooch and says come to this soiree on a remote island. All 4 of the girls think the brooch is for them, so all 4 of them go along. And so they're pulled out of the kind of sets and scenes that we would be most likely to see in the TV series. We're somewhere completely new. We are with a whole host of original characters, and so the 4 Golden Girls, they have to sell the whole concept themselves, that characterization. We can't rely on other characters making cameos or locations that we are well aware of from the show. That I think is a brave choice, but the mystery itself had a very Agatha Christie feel to it. In fact, so much so that there's one character very clearly a pastiche of Poirot, that is the amateur semi-professional investigator working the case, while our girls reluctantly and then more forcefully try to get around him and solve it themselves. We had a lot of things happening to do with the art world because we are in a renowned artist's villa. There's a little bit about questions about forgery, about publicity, and along the way we get to find out how each of the girls does or doesn't interact with those themes and the people that happen to be there. In the first book, although all 4 characters did get POVs and they all did get their own plot lines, their own moments, it felt largely like that was Rose's book, because the central tenet of the book was a couple coming from St. Olaf, Rose's hometown, to get married and her being involved in that when the murder occurred. This book is, I would say, more Blanche's book. It is her links to the museums, the art world that really drives the story, and we get a lot of insight into Blanche's past, specifically into her pre-marriage days when she is in her early 20s, when she's trying to make it on her own. I think it's a dancer in New York. We get to see her memories of a time when she is less polished, maybe a little bit more naive than that confident, kind of sexually mature woman that we see in the Golden Girls, honestly. I think I actually preferred this one to the first book. The first book I enjoyed, and I definitely said that its strength was how much it felt like the show, both in terms of the characters and in the slightly slapstick way that you could see these scenes playing out. They felt like things you would see in the TV show. I think this manages both those things as well, but the plot itself felt a little smoother. Towards the end of the first book, I personally felt like it went a little bit off the rails. There was a lot happening and sometimes I wasn't entirely certain what we were doing at that specific moment. Whereas this one has a slower build and then it does have quite an action-packed finale, but I felt that the writing kept things a little bit clearer in this book, and in terms of the actual presentation of those scenes, the writing had improved. I don't want to hit a reading slump when there's only 2 more books left in the readathon, so I'm thinking I might take it easy until the next prompt drops. Father Material is doing my prompt for mental health rep because Oliver, I would call the love interest. Yeah, he's the love interest. It's in Luke's POV. So Oliver's the love interest, and while both of them definitely I think have issues, Oliver does explicitly have eating disorder and control issues and talks in the second book about being in therapy for that. And I think actually in this book I clocked that Luke talks about being in therapy for some things as well. This is the 3rd book in the trilogy that starts with boyfriend material. That is a fake dating story that sets up Luke, who is the son of 2 aging rock stars. He works at a beetle charity, and when he starts to get some bad press, his job is on the line. He arranges to date Oliver, a very buttoned up by the books lawyer, to improve his own image. Oliver is doing it because he needs a date for a family event, and obviously feelings arise. In the second book, Husband Material, we see their relationship evolve. I thought the ending was really good, was really different from what I had been expecting, and I was very happy with it. I love the books in general, and this keeps up with that the characters are so charming and so adorable, and they work so well together. The humour is it's very Alexis Hall's humour. I don't know how to describe it. It's very wry humour, it's quite British. I love Alexis Hall. He's one of definitely my auto-buy authors. I've been reading since the self-published paranormal sapphic books he put out, but this has got to be one of my favourite series. So I've been excited, super excited about this book because it only came out a couple of weeks ago. Super excited, but also slightly apprehensive because I do know that the plot for this, or I did know the plot for this, is Luke and Oliver are moving to the next stage of their relationship and they're getting a dog together. But also it's very implied that the dog is a test run for something else. And I was a little bit disappointed when I read that because I kind of thought the last book was so much about them moving their relationship forward in ways that made sense for them and weren't necessarily hitting what society tells you have to do next, that I felt that the let's do babies, you know, boyfriends, husbands, fathers, I was a little bit like, do we have to? Do they have to? There were some bad reviews for the second book because it didn't end the way a lot of kind of category romance books expect a book all about a marriage to end. And I felt a little bit maybe this was going to just be trying to kind of retroactively fix that. So I was apprehensive, but I am halfway through it and I'm having a great time. I mean, I'm having a great time anyway. Taking out the whole father material aspect, I'm getting to see Luke and Oliver and their friends and family, and it's hilarious and charming anyway. So that's fantastic and would be no matter what. But we're also doing a lot of stuff that isn't to do with fatherhood in this. Luke's job is in danger and we're getting to see a lot of that and the anxiety around that coming through, which is an interesting subplot. But also where we've got to, we have spent a lot of time with Spud, who is our new puppy and that is adorable, and Luke is great with the puppy and also terrible with the puppy, but that's so Luke's character and it works. Now we've moved more into the explicitly that Spud is a test run potentially for a more bipedal third member of their family. I am being won over because I think Hall is still doing, even though we're doing the next aspect is children, Hall is doing it in an original way. We do still talk about their options, and we talk about how that from the last book they have a gay friend couple that have adopted a baby, and we're seeing that baby's development. One of his other straight friends has a baby at the start of the book, so we're very much, the options are presented of, you know, adoption and surrogacy are very prevalent, but where I've got to, the two have just started to discuss and lean towards fostering, which I don't know that I've really ever seen in a romance novel before. Obviously there wouldn't be any kind of surprise pregnancies in this, but I assumed we were going to do adoption, an adoption of a baby specifically, whereas it makes so much more sense for Oliver, who is such a strong moral stance character, and Luke, who is so frightened of destroying things he touches, to instead of getting a baby, to maybe help a child that is slightly older. From Oliver's point of view, it's a child that would maybe otherwise struggle to be homed. So I'm quite happy with where we are at the moment, and I'm really excited to see Luke try to put together his Crapstonbury, which is his very, very indie music festival he's trying to put on to win over a new donor. I'm halfway through it and honestly it's taken me no time at all, and I'm just so sad that I've only got 250 odd pages left. It's a fairly chunky book for just a contemporary romance, but honestly I could have read, you know, another 1,000 pages and been happy. Father material really knocked it out the park. I don't want to give too many spoilers. This is the second half of a book that is a third in a trilogy, and also it's a really recent release, so I will try to keep this part semi-spoiler free. But I loved it. I loved everything it did. I loved that Luke did get a storyline that was about him being his usual kind of chaotic self, but succeeding and being good at his job. I like that he got a storyline outside of the family romance plotline that was so prevalent in this. His work with his charity, his own relationship with his friends and his mother is all really important to the book, and I like that. But the most important thing was, of course, the fostering storyline. I was a little bit apprehensive about having kids be an element to the story at all. Husband material had done such a good job of creating Luke and Oliver's relationship as something that was about them, that didn't need to hit the milestones that everyone expects you to hit, and forging something that was completely unique to them, that worked for them even if it wasn't traditionally the steps a romance or a relationship follows. And when I heard that father material was, you know, I know they say it's about a dog, but the title kind of gives it away. So when I knew it was going to be about kids in any way, shape or form, I was a little bit, oh, are we undoing the things that we created in that second book? Are we just hitting then the milestones? They've done dating, they've maybe not exactly done marriage in the second book, but they have committed themselves, and now we're doing babies and kids. But Hall surprised me once again. Firstly, the fact that we don't do the traditional baby route was really impressive. I think it would have been easier as an author probably to have done Luke's job's on the rocks. Luke is the primary caregiver. Luke gets a newborn or a toddler, and we would have had the almost slapstick elements of Luke, who, let's be honest, is a bit of a mess, struggling to do all of those very physical aspects of looking after a toddler. We would have had comedy around changing nappies, overfeeding, maybe even some comedy over, like, you know, leaving the baby somewhere. I could have totally seen that being the way the book played out. But I think what Hall did was smarter. Instead we have fostering, which I don't think I've ever seen fostering presented as a viable option that a couple would pick in a romance novel. The only time I've seen it in any media whatsoever is Trying, which is a BBC sitcom. I've really liked all 3 series of that. But even then, it does kind of go with fostering, where the end game is adoption, whereas this is fostering for the sake of fostering. I don't think I've seen that before. Plus, having Jasmine be a 14-year-old, we had a totally different relationship dynamic. Luke isn't struggling to feed her or change nappies, but what we are seeing is the emotional challenges that Luke and Oliver face. And I like that. Yes, Luke is still a mess. He's still cringe. He's messing up every way possible. But I think if we'd done the baby, we would have had Oliver be the character he has been more often than not, which is calm, in control, in the right, usually. I think Oliver would have managed all of those things with kind of effortless grace. Instead, throwing a teenager who is full of their own thoughts, feelings and opinions into the family creates a situation where in some ways Luke actually understands her better, and it's Oliver who struggles on that emotional connection level. And I really like that it gave both our characters a chance to shine. It gave them some internal conflict with themselves and with each other. There's one scene that I found really fascinating towards the 3/4 mark. Basically, Luke and Oliver host a dinner party for all of their couple friends. And in that batch of people, we have Luke and Oliver with their foster child. We have a straight presenting couple with bi-representation that have just had a newborn baby. We have a gay couple who has adopted a baby. We have a couple who are child-free by choice, no interest in children, and kind of resent being drawn into all of this children drama. And we have a couple that has been trying to conceive and unable. And of course, over the course of dinner, things are said and there's a dispute between the various couples. Through having them argue with each other at that dinner table, we got to see how valid each choice is, and the ways I guess that it could be easy to feel that one person's choice is a critique of your own, and when it's maybe not intended to be. And I just thought the book was doing an awful lot with concepts around kids and family and how you get there while also doing the Luke and Oliver are the most adorable couple ever. I can easily imagine, much like Husband Material, there were a raft of bad reviews. I think this might get the same. Yes, the book is a capital R category romance, and I personally think it has a happy ending, but I can definitely see how people might think it doesn't, and it's kind of bittersweet and happy for now rather than a everything tied up with a bow, almost fairy tale level happily ever after. This is a book where even at the end you can see the fact that this world goes on, these characters' lives will go on after the last page, and I personally really liked it. 5 stars, perfection, but also is adding in some really interesting insights into relationships and pushing the boat of what you can put in a contemporary romance and pushing the boat of what you can put into a category romance. I really loved the things that this said about child rearing, non-child rearing, family expansion. All of that was just really well done, and I thought really well nuanced. A 5-star book in a 5-star series, so a brilliant one to end a vlog with. I hope that you have enjoyed this Amazing Readathon vlog. I hope that one of the books has maybe interested you in some way. If it has, let me know which it is. And if you have any thoughts, feelings, opinions on any of the books I picked or didn't pick, let me know whether I should go back to Death in the Caldera. If you were an Amazing Readathon participant, let me know how you got on. Did you make it to the end? Did you enjoy all your books? And if you weren't taking part in the Amazing Readathon, then just leave me some kind of travel themed emoji. Thank you for watching, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.